3 o'clock, and we will start our study session on something people have been asking about and hadn't forgot about it, which is, I guess this is the day we discuss it further. I'm guessing Ms. Driscoll is going to be spearheading this. Does the city manager have any
just going to remind you that we had a study session presentation previously on the topic. You, as a governing body, asked for some additional information and research. Staff volunteered to conduct a community survey, which they've done. They've also surveyed peer communities, and so I'll turn it over to Lauren and Amanda to walk you through the work that's gone on since your last conversation about this.
All right.
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, thank you. This year, we did have a study session on this topic. Mike Butler of Bird Scooters should be joining us via Zoom. In fact, I think I see him on there now. So if you have any particular questions as we go through this material, he'll be available as a subject matter expert related to that. But coming out of that study session, you gave us a couple different pieces of homework. One was to survey the community. So Amanda's going to talk you through kind of how we did that, what those questions were, and what the results are. And then we also surveyed our peer communities, learning about their experience with Bird, with scooters, and how that's gone for them and what approach they are taking now. Following this analysis, including comments from the public and comments from other communities, we'll talk a little bit more about feedback we got from staff as we went through this research, as our staff in various departments became more aware of scooters, started reaching out to their peers in other communities. It brought forward some additional information. So that's outlined at the end of the presentation. And then we'll talk a little bit about what we're hoping to get from you guys today regarding direction and where you'd like us to go from this. As typical of a study session, no hard decisions being made today, but staff would like guidance on how you would like us to pursue or not to pursue this topic. So with that, I'm going to give you to Amanda Barnett, our Lead for Kansas Fellow, also part of AmeriCorps. She's going to walk you through things. Thanks.
Hello, Commissioners. So this survey was a pleasure to be able to research, so thanks for the opportunity. So this survey results are organized into 3 different sections. The first section is the municipal feedback. So as we go through it, we were able to we solicited responses from 20 municipalities, 15 of which were able to respond back to us. It was not a blind survey. We actually got the contact information of the persons responsible in those neighboring municipalities in order to ask them these specific questions. So it was based on email responses, so none of them were anonymous, so to speak. We can trace back, so if you have any questions specifically about some of their responses, we can totally get you that information. 15 responses came back out of the 20. The populations were definitely a breadth. There's 2,500 people in some of the communities, all the way up to nearly 400,000. As far as the scooter presence, in terms of like matching what it would be comparable here in Salina, the scooters count was anywhere from 25 scooters all the way up to 250 based off of the population. Something that is interesting is that 0 municipalities have reported fielding any questions, concerns, or public comments after the first 60 days. So they did all report that the first 60 days is a little bit more intensive to make sure that the public understands where to direct comments, concerns, and questions. And many municipalities commented that they wanted some more pre-launch informational marketing to go out to the communities. They also had very good things to say about the Bird dashboard and how easy that makes it to communicate with Bird and have like real-time changes to either the no-go zones or slow zones. So on the following page, municipalities' experience overall for user responsibility is pretty average. Users of scooters are, you get the gambit, so averaged out, it's shockingly average. Bird cooperation and corporate responsiveness, above average to excellent. Municipalities had really great experiences with working with Bird as a private company. Quality of the fleet, excellent to average. We did have one municipality recommend a specific type of scooter When we get down the road of actually selecting a scooter type to be in the city, that will be relevant. But really the determining factor seems to be the fleet manager specifically. So the bird representative local who is responsible for responding to any of these sorts of concerns, questions, safety, misplacement of scooters, etc. Really the experience of the community comes down to whether or not the fleet manager is an excellent or mediocre or below average fleet manager. So also on this, in terms of liability at the time of this survey, no legal action had been taken against the city for any bird-related or motorized scooter-related activity, accidents, anything like that. So on this next page is the municipal feedback and comment form, reiterating the being prepared for heavier city involvement and communicating FAQs in the first 60 days. Some communities, one community in specific, said that they've just treated this like any other private business in the community, with the exception of adding the liability section of the MOU, which is a Memorandum of Understanding to operate the pilot program. One community did say that the complaint system seems to be driven solely by the app on a smartphone, but I have received updates from Bird that they have opened up a phone number line that you could actually call or text in order to have a conversation with a live person, which is an excellent addition in my opinion. And then again, reiterating the quality of fleet management. So as far as municipal survey questions, do you have any comments, concerns, deeper questions at that point?
Nope.
Okay. So the public survey was after the municipal survey. We conducted this for a total of 30 days. We opened the survey online on July 5th and closed it on August 5th of this year, 2022. Access to the survey was provided on television ads where they had the QR code, which you could scan, of course, with your smartphone. So there was on the Channel 20 bulletin board. Excuse me, Salina 311 ran a post on their online news. We had social media presence on both Facebook and Instagram. And then, of course, our city website homepage had a link as well. In total, we received 778 responses over the 30 days. There was a period of disqualification, and how we went about disqualifying is that it was either too little time to take. The questionnaire was 10 questions, so if you took any less than 2 minutes to answer the questions, I said you probably were a bot. So those were eliminated. Too many responses from the same IP. So that could be like one person just answering and answering and answering and answering. So anytime that we had 4 or more responses from the same IP address, we eliminated those responses as well. And incomplete surveys. Out of 10 questions, if you did not answer 4 or more, then those responses were also eliminated as well. I will caveat this to say that in the final questions where it was response-driven and like typed answers, I did go back and look at all responses in order to make sure that if there were some valid questions, comments, concerns, what have you, if that's all the participant wanted to do is offer some comment, that they were scooped up in tabulating all of those comments. So in total, 548 responses remain, which is a whopping 70% of the responses in total. So we counted as 70% valid responses.
Can I ask a quick question? Mm-hmm. Of the 230 invalidated, how many of those were from the too many times on an IP address?
I think that one was actually very much. I believe that there was only 15 responses that were eliminated because of that reason.
Thanks.
All right. So this next part is going into the actual questions and the responses thereof. Question 1 is, how many electric scooter trips have you taken, ever, anywhere? Basically, how familiar are you with electric scooters in general? And nearly 60% of the survey respondents responded that they have never had a scooter ride or been on an electric scooter. So I found that to be interesting. Question number 2. Pardon my cough. So 548 respondents with 845 items selected. So this particular question, question number 2, what is the most frequent reason you've ridden a scooter? We had this be a multiple choice question. So if your response, you could say up to 3 things. You could select up to 3 things. In this particular question, respondents selected an average of 1.5. So they had obviously a primary, and then some of them had a secondary reason. More than 50% said connecting to transit, OCC K-bus, or riding for fun or recreation as the reasons to take a scooter ride. Question number 3. Think about your most recent scooter trip. If you hadn't taken a scooter, it should say, would you have taken the trip? So, sorry, on the slide, it should say, would you have taken the trip? And for the most part, people would have taken the trip, even if they didn't have the scooter. Question number 4 is how would you have taken the trip if you didn't have a scooter? If you hadn't had a scooter, how would you have traveled? Driven, a personal vehicle, or walked represent about 50% of the responses there as well. Question number 5 is another multiple choice question with an average of 2.3 items per respondent. Thinking about the potential benefits of electric scooters, please select up to 3 of the following that you find the most important. The most important would be increased support for walking, biking, and getting around without a car. This did have an other option where there was text provided. 22% of the respondents decided to write in an answer, and of those, we kind of categorized them as far as like positive responses, neutral responses, and generally against scooters. And so 91 or 72.8% of those who responded via written message were kind of unfavorable to scooters. And many of those were indicating that they don't want taxpayer dollars going towards the launch of a scooter presence in town. And others revolved around safety, appearance, or kind of like the nuisance factor of having scooters kind of around town. So halfway through the questions, any questions on the survey thus far?
Can you slow down just a little bit?
Absolutely.
I'm able to absorb all this data here.
No worries, absolutely. So, any particular questions? Just overall, chill out, lady. Okay. Question 6. This is also a multiple choice question. Thinking about electric scooters in general, which of the following ideas would you agree with? And there's a handful of kind of positive notions, generally in favor. Scooters can replace some Lyft or Uber rides. Scooters can help customers get to businesses. There's 2 neutral answers. The city should focus on non-car transportation, and I would support prohibiting scooters riding on sidewalks. Those were identified as neutral because they're relatively neutral. And then there's a handful of answers also kind of leaning the not for scooters or concerns related to scooters, like scooters are unsafe, park scooters on sidewalks, block the path for travel and for pedestrians, and generally opposed to scooters. As you can see, based off of the responses, there are about 55% kind of in the green or positive category. There is also a text response for other, please provide more information. 60% of those responses, so 41, raise questions about policies and enforcement of the rules, such as where are scooters safe to operate, and who will enforce traffic and placement.
And I don't know whether I look at you, Amanda, or city staff, wasn't there a minimum age to ride these? And
Yes.
was that 16?
I believe that there are municipalities who have said 16. There's also been municipalities who have identified 18.
Okay. Because a couple of the questions there dealt with children riding them to school, so those basically would kind of be thrown out.
Right.
Okay,
Yep, unless they're college age,
true.
so. All right. Question 7. This, try to get straight to the point. Are you generally for or against electric scooters in Salina? There's a slight leaning for. I identified a little as more of like the neutral stance. And the reason that I was able to do that is the corresponding write-in answers. So it was more often than not, respondents that said they would be a little bit in favor also had concerns about safety or the nuisance aspect or like how would it actually operate or those sorts of questions where it was pretty clear that they were unsure and more in the neutral category. So I did not flip that over to the positive leaning, which would make the overall, in general, are we for or against, up to 67.8% for. I felt like that was kind of a misuse of the data, and so that a little category is seen, in my opinion, as neutral. Okay, question number 8.
Were you, the responses, I'm pretty impressed with the number of responses. Were you?
I was too. Yeah, we all were. We were expecting to need to throw out a lot more responses than we did.
Yeah, I don't recall a city survey that's had this big a response.
Commissioner,
Yes.
put your microphone on.
Oh,
Is that red
push your
button?
button there, Bill, is it on?
It's not red.
Yeah, it should be.
Red is good.
Right. Push that button.
Red is hot.
Yeah, okay.
I think red means stop.
Yeah. We did notice a correlation with Salina 311 posting it on their online news forum and an increase of responses. So that very well could be a factor. Also with the multitude of ways that people could access it, including social media. These guys back here did a really great job of getting the word out, so. But yes, we were definitely surprised by the number. Okay, question 8. So this is where we go and start to look at some of the responses that were also thrown out in the beginning. So overall, for the total survey, we had 778 responses. Only 647 of them had this write-in question, so actual text in this response. And of those 647, we threw out a couple because of invalid or inappropriate, special character only, or completely unreadable responses. So that's where we get the 599, which is a different number, of course, than the rest of the survey. But I did want to mention that we did account for the people who wanted to take the survey and only offer comment, and not necessarily take the other portions of the survey. Trends for this, and how I went about doing this is, obviously with qualitative data, you have to kind of read each comment and find some themes and find a couple of categories where you can say, okay, well, these comments kind of fall into those lines. And so the list over here on the far right-hand side are the categories in which I was able to bracket out these comments. And some paragraphs of input had 5 or 6 of these in here, and they were all counted in each of those categories. So one comment could be up to 6 categories as far as the data is concerned. Top concerns or questions is community respect, behavior, and usage. So this would be including public opinion, theft, vandalism, basically, are these things going to be left on my lawn? If so, I don't want them, sorts of understandable concerns. And tied to that actually is fleet management. So who's going to come get them, redistributing, working condition, maintenance, making sure they're charged up, etc. That was next with 11% of those respondents citing fleet management as a concern. Cost to the user and user behavior. So are we actually providing a solution that's going to increase the opportunity for transportation for all citizens, even some of those on the lower end of the socioeconomic scale? That I feel like is a Bird question. And then user behavior, of course, I know that Bird has a user agreement, and they can, of course, be revoked from being able to reserve any additional scooters, but that doesn't necessarily mean that their buddy's not going to get their scooter for them, and then they're still acting like a ding-dong. So, and then enforcement and safety, and this was certainly echoed. Public survey, but also when we received additional comments from our city departments and other community members as well. Enforcement and safety, including rules, regulations of riding, enforcing those regulations, and then the company consequences for non-compliance. And a lot of those were like, can we kick Bird out? And the answer is yes, we can. With a 30-day notice in the pilot program, we can say, no, thank you. So question 8, just a sampling of some of the questions and kind of what I saw in terms of how I pulled out that information. How is it ran? Is it going to be a fine if you don't bring it back or destroy it? So a lot about that community behavior and user. Can we trust people to be responsible and pay attention? There's that safety piece. Is there a charge and a deposit so that the rate for the user? Lots of factors to go through. Would it be allowed on sidewalks? So again, there's that enforcement and safety piece. Will they have to follow the rules of the road and the bicycles? So those are just a couple of examples of the comments that were received in question 8. Any questions? Okay.
I'm with you so far.
Okay, awesome. Question 9 and 10, these were an either-or setup. So we had 2 statements of kind of opposing viewpoints, and I'll read the 2 of question 9, which is associated with the orange bars. Before cities limit or scale back operations of scooter companies, data should be gathered to evaluate their benefits. And that was selected at 58% over the opposing statement. Before scooter companies are allowed to expand operations, data should be gathered to evaluate how safe they are. And question 10 is the green lines. Scooter companies should be allowed to innovate and bring new features and innovations to market, testing which features customers like best. That got 59%. Actually, I think those 2 are opposite. I think the 59 is up at the top and the 58 is down at the bottom. And that's against the opposing question. Scooter companies should be tightly regulated and only be allowed to expand their operations once they have shown scooter usage is safe. And so I see this as a clear statement that the citizens really prefer that we don't limit the operations, expansions, innovation, and market testing of private companies. I think that holds true to the perspective of many of our citizens. And so I think that this was an interesting one, and 95% of the respondents answered this question. So it's an excellent representation of the respondents and, in my opinion, our citizens. That concludes the public survey. Questions, comments?
Was age?
Age and demographics were not collected in this survey.
Okay.
Well, it's always nice to say, let's be a free market, but then on the other hand, we're responsible for public safety and the image of our community. So I'd have to temper those remarks with our role here sitting on the dais as
Yep. And that was certainly echoed when we got the additional feedback, which is in our next section. All right, with the additional comments, these were questions which are included from Salina PD and others. Some of them have answers, and others are to be discussed and decided if we decide to move forward with the pilot program. PD specifically reached out to us and had a couple concerns, which we were able to address with Bird, and then also had a meeting kind of to the side as well to understand which pieces are needing answers right away and which pieces kind of it depends on if we want to go forward with it. I don't necessarily think that any of us want to write a new piece of legislation of how to include electric scooters if we decide to not let them here. So kind of those sorts of things, but they will certainly be a stakeholder moving forward. Their opinions and insight was very helpful in this process. So opportunities for clarification and discussion. These questions came kind of out of the public survey, as well as it's kind of a conglomeration of the various questions from municipality, public, and the internal departments. So hard costs of the scooters. We had many of our public ask if there was going to be any taxable liability, essentially, or our tax dollars going to go towards it. And the simple answer is no. The slightly more detailed answer is that in order to make sure that we have a marketing campaign and a coordinated effort between the city as well as this private company, there's going to be a couple of man hours associated, but in general, we're not paying for the scooters. That's a private company bringing stuff in. Really, the cost is going to be the time and the energy spent by staff coordinating and making sure that it launches smoothly in that first 60 days. The question was raised about how it compares to the Rent-A-Bike program, and I was not able to get enough information to feel like I could answer that question effectively. So I'm committed to kind of circling back in on that and actually providing that information. But it was asked, and I don't want to just gloss over that it was asked. What kinds of rules and regulations to allow the private business to operate? Who will be responsible for policing the rules and regulations? Does PD or code enforcement have capacity? We did see that one municipality treated it like any other transportation company that wanted to come into town, but we also understand with concerns as far as like, is it a bicycle? Is it a pedestrian? How are we going to enforce it? Like, and what level do we escalate things? Like, do we just call Bird for everything, and then, if somebody's hurt, then we call PD? Or there's lots of questions and decisions to be made as far as the process in that regard. And how does the community report issues, and what are the expectations of the fleet management responsiveness? I have heard from Mike Butler that they do now have a phone number that you can call and text 24/7. Fleet management is responsible to respond 24/7 within 4 hours. So even in the middle of the night, even if it's snowing, even on weekends and holidays, if you have a scooter in your front yard and you don't like it, it should be dealt with within 4 hours. Opportunities and clarification, part 2. What kind of education and marketing will go along with this program? Bird does have a kind of a packet that they launch cities with, and this will be the coordination piece between the city departments as well as Bird to do a partnered proactive educational campaign. And there are more details on the future steps kind of a little bit farther in this presentation. Are there payment and rental options for people without credit cards or smartphones? I guess I don't know the answer as far as without credit cards, but yes, without smartphones, that number is also available to be able to reserve and unlock the scooters, if you can call and text. So without a phone, no, but without a smartphone, yes. Safety, what does safety look like in other towns, and whose liability is it if someone gets hurt? As far as Bird's response is here. This is one of the ones that I was able to say, hey, what has been your experience in other municipalities? No different than if someone were to be involved in an incident today. So if somebody has a private, their own personal scooter or their own personal bicycle, if there's an injury, then you call the authorities. If there's not an injury, then you work it up the chain of whomever is the insured, or, it's kind of a private incident at that point in time. Questions?
On that liability, say someone slams into the side of a car, who's liable?
That's an excellent question. And I would ask if Mike has an answer to that one.
Yeah. Commissioners, nice to meet you. My name is Mike Butler. I run our government partnerships team in the state of Kansas. There's no difference between that and someone slamming into a personal vehicle, whether that vehicle is a scooter, car, bicycle, or they happen to hit it with their body. There's no difference there. If there's a claim is to be made, adjuster is brought out, and someone is held liable for that action. But it's in rarely cases that's not the city's fault, if that's what you're leaning towards, though.
So you're saying the rider would be liable?
Correct.
Yep. And that is in line with what we heard from the municipalities as far as zero claims against the city for liability for any injury involving a scooter of the cities that responded.
Does Bird Scooter carry insurance if they were brought into to a suit on something like that? Because it's just like it's kind of like in a car. It's the car insurance versus a scooter insurance. I guess I don't know how that works.
Yeah, we do, and that's our insurance coverages, which have been approved by well over a dozen cities in the state of Kansas. Those coverages are outlined in what would be the operating agreement that we've sent to staff to evaluate.
Okay. So the next slide is future tasks and decisions. We kind of have two little buckets. We have the legislative decisions, and then we also have community outreach. Of course, there's a ton of questions that we need to kind of sort out amongst ourselves in terms of, how are scooters defined? Are they defined as bicycles or pedestrians? And how we define that means are they allowed on the sidewalks, or do they need to be in a bike lane, or do they need to be, following the flow of traffic? Sorts of those questions. So that's certainly a big one.
How fast do they go?
Mike?
About 16.
So, enough to hurt yourself if you fall off, but no, not enough to really get into the flow of traffic.
How does our
Used
city
to ride a Segway around.
How does city ordinances read now as far as riding scooters on sidewalks?
No go.
Lauren Driscoll, Director of Community and Development Services. Right now, they'd be considered a coaster toy. It's kind of like riding your bike on the sidewalks. We have certain areas of town that those really aren't supposed to be on the sidewalks. Ideally, and I think Mike's talked about this in previous presentations, they're really supposed to be in bike lanes, on the road. They're supposed to be obeying traffic rules. They're really not supposed to be on the sidewalk. And there are, to Commissioner Ryan's question, there are slow zones too. So if there are certain areas of caution, the mapping system that the scooters work off of, there may be areas in which that 16 miles per hour comes down to something slower to manage those areas of concern.
Ms. Driscoll, were you Was that question for bicycles currently or scooters currently?
Scooters is what I
Scooter.
asked.
All right. And our city rule for bicycles now is that, I know downtown they're not supposed to be on the sidewalk, but otherwise they are allowed on sidewalks?
Correct, unless they're motorized, and I think we get into different things when things become electric and motorized. It's kind of a different category. So if you have an electric bike, which are becoming more and more popular, in talking with PD, that's a whole nother category that probably at the same time we start looking at this, we may have to kind of tackle that as kind of a bigger category, electric bikes and scooters.
Well, and I think we start running into neighborhood sidewalks versus our 10-foot sidewalks that are on Ohio Street, Schilling, going to be, be more prominent too, so.
Yeah, but we are seeing quite a rise, particularly in the electric bikes, even in personal ownership, due to high gas prices and a variety of other things. Plus the availability of them, the reliability of them is becoming more popular.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, if I could comment, I would recommend that these never be allowed on the sidewalk. There's a sticker in our vehicles that actually says no running on sidewalks, and that's likely because 99% of cities don't allow it, and that sidewalks are typically reserved for pedestrians and not for bicycles or any type of vehicle that's going above 10 miles an hour or so. So that's our recommendation.
So that would fall into line with the questions in the legislative bucket as far as the presentation is concerned. While laws or city codes would need to be changed to accommodate bird. Also, guidelines of responsibility of the city and its departments for reporting and responding to bird-related items. And could we do a temporary ordinance while pilot is running instead of actually changing code in its totality? As far as community outreach is concerned, a partnered informational marketing campaign, including bird rider requirements, responsibilities, and rates. So requirements would be potentially age requirements, responsibilities being their understanding of who's liable for, driving themselves into a parked car. And then the rates, of course, is negotiated with bird as far as like the cost per minute. Appropriate locations for riding and parking. So having an education about, not putting it on other people's lawns and not like laying over the middle of the sidewalk and so on and so forth. And then also the contact methods, when to call bird, when to call 911, and when to call the city. And information of when and where traffic may be impacted.
Are these allowed to be ridden at night, or do they automatically shut down? Do they have lights?
So I think, Mike, they do have some lights, and we can also set them to what times. I think certain areas they're allowed to be ridden. I also wanted to just kind of quickly touch on the public outreach. I think Amanda talked a lot about that partnership, but that's not a forever thing. So ideally, it's those first 60 days, and you're helping to kind of launch this. And it's really not just us, it's any of the partners or stakeholders who want to get involved. As kind of part of this educational process, when Bird first came to the city, the universities got involved, USD 305's had this conversation, SDI from downtown, a variety of different entities. So this kind of launch and awareness would be taking material that Bird has for instance, like social media posts kind of pre-done. You just load those puppies up in a 30-day cycle and they just start going out the door. So the idea is you don't have people signing up, trying the scooters for the first time, and then finding out where they can and can't park. We start talking 30 to 60 days out about what is etiquette. Don't chuck this on somebody's lawn. Like, that's not going to go over well. This is the appropriate way to park it. This is where our zones are. This is where you can and can't use them. And you just start kind of hitting people with that. So the first time they go and actually log onto the scooter, it's not a crash course in scooter education. They've been hearing this for a couple of months up and coming. And again, it's not just coming from us. So I just kind of want to be clear that we're not creating a whole new marketing position to run this. And the materials really aren't developed by us. They're Bird materials that we just tweak to mirror our information and where it's going to be appropriate in our community. And it's kind of prepping and getting that message out. And half of that's really to our benefit to have less of those phone calls once it starts being up and going. So, sorry, Mike, to lights.
Yes, and yeah, and echo all of that. We've obviously done this hundreds and hundreds of times with what I would say are very sophisticated cities. And within that, the 4 to 6 week lead up time is hugely important, getting materials out there and education out there. So kind of like what we're talking about, this isn't new when you actually show up for day one. People have been prepared for it. They are street legal. They have headlights, they have brake lights, tail lights, all of the above. Operating hours are typically between 4 a.m., so starting at 4 a.m. and then shutting down at midnight. And, you know, we like to open them up early because there are people that work odd jobs and need to use this on occasion for daily commutes to work. But we also understand that, you know, when bad things happen in the city, they tend to happen past midnight, so we might as well shut them down so where they can't be used at that hour.
Okay. You do have a slide that says in the news. It's essentially notable things that are happening in Kansas. There's some people that are adding, some people that are removing, and overall we still have 8 cities across Kansas that are using Bird Scooter. And if we go to the final slide, in summary, municipalities suggest that we can anticipate intensive first 60 days, even with a proactive informational marketing campaign. There's just that 60 days where it's a little bit more work. Citizens are split in terms of scooters, but are clear in preferring that the government not limit operations, expansion, innovation, and market testing of private companies, as stated in the question 9 and 10 before. Salina PD has communicated concerns about the current laws and city code regarding the enforceability of safety precautions on city streets. PD is also mindful of the capacity of our city to respond to citizens' concerns, especially as many departments across the city are understaffed. And Bird has confirmed they are committed to Salina and remains interested in a partnership. All right.
Ms. Driscoll, did you have any more, or you wanted to
No, it's
direct conversation towards...
where would you guys like to go with this? I mean, it's really interesting. I've been at this public employee thing for about 20 years now, and I've never seen a survey result quite like this. There's a whole lot of people, which I'm pretty sure I owe Amanda lunch because I didn't think we were going to get this many. And it's really kind of a 50-50 split. I think there's just enough of a hair of a margin over that 50-50 in the positive that are kind of like, I'm not completely opposed to it, but I don't really know what it's going to bring us. And rightly so, I think there are some very logical concerns there. I definitely think kind of that question we had in the beginning is, do we do a pilot program or do we just launch into something? I definitely think the results of the survey would, if you choose to go forward with something, definitely jive with a pilot program. You know, that's testing the water out kind of concept. And I do think there are some details we're going to have to work out regarding how we enforce this, how we manage this, and the efforts related to it. But with that, I mean, staff's prepared to move forward in the direction that you give us.
Sorry, how many were they talking about deploying as part of the pilot?
Mike, do you want to take that?
Yeah, and I do want to echo that as well. I think our recommendation anytime we enter any city is to enter to some type of pilot program. That's the point of this. This is non-permanent. This is temporary. This is not. There's no capital, requirement here on the city standpoint. So this is something that is free for you all to the city. In fact, we can actually even share a portion of the revenue with you to offset oftentimes the staff hours in the opening months. But that is our recommendation, to just view this as a pilot program. And within that, we can launch with a very measured, calculated number of vehicles, typically somewhere between 50 and 75. And then if demand necessitates it and says, hey, we're actually getting a lot of utilization, it makes sense for us to add, let's say 20, 25 vehicles. We would only do so based on staff's input and on staff's approval.
And what are the rates?
It costs $1 to unlock the vehicle, so the vehicles remain locked. You walk up to it with your smartphone, costs $1 to unlock it. And then for every minute that you're using it, it's usually between 30 and 40 cents. So obviously if you take this for 20, 30, 40 minutes, that's going to be a long, higher fare. But on average, a trip is around $6 to $7.
Mike, does Bird do any partnerships with large stakeholders like universities to offset costs for university users?
Yeah, we have some I would say just discount programs that are available. Oftentimes they're for folks that are enrolled in government assistance programs, veterans, which is Veterans Day, senior citizens, healthcare workers, students that have specific types of grants attached to their scholarship. So those are all things that we've done, and we have partnerships with, I think, over 80 colleges and universities across the country, many of which are huge users of this, because sometimes it's difficult to try to find affordable transportation when you're trying to, when you're a college student, as we all were at some point. So those are always things that we can do.
That was my question is, have you had input from the universities and employers?
Yeah, so initially when we had this first conversation and Bird came to us, we got together with the major employers, OCCK, SDI from downtown, USD 305, and the universities. And all of us are cautiously optimistic. I mean, every group could recognize that there are people within their population, whether it's students, whether it's employees, that could benefit from some of the help. A lot of times in transportation planning, we talk about last mile. It's always the hardest to connect, right? So you can have a major route, but somebody's just a little bit off that route. How do you connect that last piece? But with only so many resources, you have to hit those biggest points. Pieces like electric scooters or electric bikes can help, bridge the gap in that last mile type stuff. We did, so Bird has this map that's in their program. So when you're on the app and you're zipping around with these things, the scooter's always within the map grid. If you're out of the grid, it doesn't work anymore. But also there's areas in there that are slow down areas or no-go areas. So all those different stakeholders gave feedback into the map that would launch with the Bird scooter app. And so that was directly not going on to Kansas Wesleyan University. They had certain spots where you could get and park. We talked with parks about where we would want them and how they would go through parks. So you could actually allow for drive-through roads, but not into the park itself. Definitely major employers identify that they would be okay with, identifying a Bird drop-off and pickup area. Kind of a variety of different things. We also talked about pickup and drop-off areas because that's kind of critical. Usually within the first couple of weeks, Bird is closely monitoring if stuff's getting picked up at those spots. If they're not, they're going to redistribute them, but that's always an ongoing conversation. When Amanda talked about the dashboard, that's really what we as kind of the primary partner with Bird can see. So Bird allows us to see the data about how many of these are getting used, where they're being used at, and we can access that dashboard to do quick map changes. So let's say we have a disaster and something needs to happen immediately to not allow scooters into a certain area. The map can immediately be updated, and then that locks down that area and you can't have scooters going through that area. Or for instance, like Riverfest comes up. We probably do not want scooters going through Oakdale Park, a day or two leading up to Riverfest and a day or two after as we set up, take down, and run that event. So there are components, we have a parade happening, and this is something we've even identified in the new special events permit, that may be a checkpoint of implementing that permit is it a marathon, for instance? We probably do not want Bird scooters in the marathon path, so we would drop that into the dashboard so the map updated, those types of things. Parades, so that can make some of those locations a little bit more doable. But I think everybody we talked to said, yeah, we have people who could use this. Do we know how much they'll use it or how successful it'll be? No, not quite.
Well, over my years at Phillips, I saw several people, for whatever reason, take a taxi or walk to work. And a lot of them were temporary employees, and if they were really good workers, people would generally give them rides. But others just walked.
Well, and I think a lot of it comes down to common sense and education of the user. We still have people jogging at 5 in the morning dressed in black. It's not a smart thing to do if you're in the bike lane on a street that's 40 miles an hour and people can't see you. The problem with bikes is that drivers of cars very often don't see them. And we already have a unregulated, non-pilot program with electric bikes. I mean, they have been unleashed on the street with nothing as formal rollout as this. Yet I think, they probably are similar devices as far as how we would regulate them. Very often bicycles and electric bikes will get to the intersection, it's a red light. Well, if you're a pedestrian, you wait. If you're a car, you wait. Bikes sort of, well, if the no car is coming, I'm going to go in the red light, which can throw off people trying to make right-hand turns or walking. Most drop-offs in our residential neighborhoods, because of our low housing density, probably going to be in front of their own house. And neighbors will probably exert enough peer pressure to correct that to some degree. The risk, for injury, if you drive crazy, you do run risk of getting hurt. But I think the bike running into someone is no different from, or the scooter, than a bicycle running. In fact, you probably have a greater chance of finding the culprit because these are being monitored, whereas the bike, you can go put in their garage and nobody will ever see it again. At least somebody will be looking for this scooter, and a damaged one at that.
Well, and the interesting thing about this is, from a purely legislative kind of regulatory thing, is we really have two different issues here. We have one, our relationship as a city with Bird Scooter. Essentially, they're a provider of a service, right? And we're either going to allow the service or not, and how they do that is through a memorandum of understanding or agreement. The other piece of this is, how do we in general regulate these electric scooters and bikes? That's kind of what we're talking about, of people knowing where and how to drive them, how to safely interact with traffic, those types of things. That is whether it's using one of Bird Scooters or using one you've bought yourself. That driver education is just a challenge. So there's kind of two pieces to this, is how does Bird behave, and then how do we all behave as users with these new devices?
And to what you're saying, we've already allowed a similar service with the electric bikes.
Well, we don't allow it. They're just, most of those are privately owned.
Right, but we've allowed the same type of vehicle on our sidewalks and streets with the electric bikes. As far as the same danger, interaction with motorists, and all the concerns that are being, only difference is because they're privately owned, people take them in the house at night. But my son uses the one in Phoenix. The light rail ends 5.5 blocks from his work, so he gets on the light rail, and the last 5 blocks he uses his scooter. But he does not ride it. They have wide sidewalks. You have to be careful where you in the sidewalk and where you're on the street. But it's just like bicycles. You get used to change. But this is an opportunity for us to manage the change as far as public safety. But I think the service is already here. As far as the things that most folks are concerned about, other than where you drop them off, I mean, the safety and everything, we're already encountering that with the electric bikes.
So I know we are coming up short on time. I guess, where would you like staff to go from here?
Well, to the mayor's last point, it sounds like staff's going to have to expend resources to work this all out, whether it's private individuals acquiring these items or whether it's a contracted service you can just pick up at the street corner. So you're going to expend your effort and time to work out what's best for the public safety.
And with the electric bikes now, I mean, we need to decide, where you can ride them and where you can't. I think, for me, that's the biggest hurdle.
If it's motorized and has wheels, it shouldn't be on the sidewalk. To me, that's very straightforward. Right. Unless we're talking like little power wheels for a toddler. But
right.
Back when I worked patrol, bicycles were not allowed on the sidewalk, period. It was kind of a judgment call. You see a kid on the sidewalk, no problem. You see the guy in the trek bike going 30 miles an hour, then and they're not going to do that, but that would be a no-go. It's just common sense. But to me, I see this very plainly as it's a private business offering another transportation option to the community, and I think it would be silly to stand in the way. Just kind of, I mean, this is going to happen organically anyway. There's people who are going to be buying similar scooter products and privately, so this is going to happen regardless of these safety issues that we've talked about. They're going to happen, whether we say yes or no. And to me, I'm a big believer in free market, and this is a private company, it's a service, and our citizens will determine whether it's a viable business plan or not.
Right.
I'm probably the fun hater here. I see significant staff time. I think when Bird Scooters talked about this last time, we were the ones who are going to have to educate and do all that. I think staff has enough on their plate right now. I see this more as a recreational, in our community, more recreational than I do actually being a benefit, maybe perhaps like Mayor Davis said for his son. We talk about getting to schools if we're trying to get out to the VOTEC or we're trying to get out to K-State Salina. We're talking Magnolia Centennial Road, really not good shoulders, 16-mile-an-hour scooter and a 40-mile-an-hour 40-mile-an-hour speed zone. I just, for some reason, and I've seen in Hayes how they're in their downtown, how they're left on the sidewalks, and they block half of a sidewalk. Manhattan, they use them quite a bit because it is a large college, and every one of them I saw at game day is on the sidewalks being ridden, not on the street, and that maybe is not all that bad because it's a high traffic time. I guess, at the cost, if you're $1 to unlock it and you got $6, $7 on it every time you ride it, I just don't see the usage being there. I think there's a couple communities that, so I know it's private business. I just see the city having a lot more involvement in it than Bird Scooters does once it gets started. So I guess I'm going to be the fun hater and say I just
But
assume we do
we're already
something else.
there with what we have on the street now.
So that's private. That's not us putting other. And if I own something, I'm going to take care of it. If I ride it downtown, I'm going to ride it back home. In this case, I can ride it from wherever to downtown and just leave it sitting in front of somebody's business. And then hopefully Bird Scooters has hired somebody that's going to be responsible to pick those up and take them wherever. But it could be in front of your business for 2 or 3 days. There's, I don't know. That's the way it looked in Hayes. They were just kind of sitting there. Some of them were standing up, some of them were laying down.
Okay. And I have a few more comments too, but we're not going to have time to go through it.
I have one too.
Well, we're going to table the rest of our conversation to either questions to send to Ms. Driscoll. We have to take a 2-minute break to get ready for the next meeting.
You may want to take this up in other business to facilitate continued conversation. I'd rather that you do that than
That's a good idea.
take this conversation offline.
All right, we will break for 2 minutes.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
right, it is a little after 4 o'clock. We'll bring the November 14th Salina City Commission meeting to order and ask the city clerk if the Kansas Open Meeting Act required notice has been properly provided.
Yes.
Thank you. May I have roll call, please?
Mayor Davis,
Here.
Commissioner Hoppick,
Here.
Commissioner Lankowitz,
Here.
Commissioner Longbine,
Here.
Commissioner Ryan.
Here.
Thank you. All who are able, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance in a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We are going to get started with a proclamation.
Item 3.1, recognition of the 100th anniversary of the Dunbar School. Scarlett Sharp, 5th grade student at Cottonwood Elementary School, will read the proclamation.
Ms. Sharp.
Proclamation celebrating 100th anniversary of Dunbar School. Whereas Dunbar School, named after Black African-American poet and author Paul Laurence Dunbar, was established in 1922 for the education of Black African-American youth from kindergarten through 8th grade. And whereas Dunbar School provided a nurturing environment that presented students the opportunity to excel in the presence of staff and faculty that modeled excellence, expected the best of them, and encouraged a love of education. And whereas Dunbar School was home to many notable individuals associated with the name and memories of this school, including the first Black African-American mayor of Salina, a state representative and member of the Kansas School of Regents, Robert C. Caldwell. Mr. Caldwell was a former teacher and principal at Dunbar School. And whereas Dunbar School existed in Salina as a public school until it closed in 1955. The closing followed the Supreme Court Brown v. Board of Education of Topeka ruling of 1954 declaring separate schools based on their skin color illegal. And whereas Dunbar School former students are slowly decreasing in numbers as the years pass, descendants continue honoring the many movers and shakers, believers and achievers. Members of the Dunbar School Association continue to keep the memory alive and honor those that paved the way for generations to come. And whereas now, therefore, be it resolved that the mayor and city commissioners of the city of Salina do hereby recognize as the 100th anniversary of Dunbar School and urge everyone to participate in the numerous activities honoring the rich history of this educational institution. Proclaimed this 14th day of November 2022.
Why, thank you. Very well done. Do you perhaps have a list of some of those activities, or did you bring someone with you who has a list of those activities? All right, stay right there, Scarlett, and come on up front and tell the city what's, and Scarlett, don't leave because I'm going to have you come get this certificate. We'll take a picture, all right? Please, yeah.
My name is Mike Boswell, and I'm here. I have the schedule in case anybody needs it or wants to find out.
Well, I tell you, you got free advertising right now, so go ahead and enlighten us. Come a little closer to that microphone there, okay?
Okay. Saturday from 10 to 11:30, the school's 100th anniversary has a plaque unveiling at a Dunbar School, and there's a watercolor print presented and tour of Dunbar School. I just want to say that I'm an alumni of Dunbar School. I went there from 50, but anyway, from kindergarten all the way to 4th grade. And that was like 50 to 55, 54 I think it was. And the location's at 509 East Elm, 12 to 1:30 Dunbar, and we're having a luncheon. And it's located at St. John's Missionary Baptist Church at 215 South Chicago 2 to 4 o'clock, Dunbar is having a celebration program and reception at Kansas Wesleyan, Fitzpatrick Auditorium, 141 West Claflin Avenue. 7 to 10 p.m., Dunbar anniversary reception at Courtyard of Marriott, 3020 Riffin Drive. Sunday at St. John's Missionary Church, we have a service, a worship service, and everybody's invited. And that'll be all. I can have these when we put these.
Well, you can certainly leave one with me, one with the city clerk, and I don't know how many you brought, but
Quite a few, maybe 15, 10.
just feel free to leave. Well, I tell you, leave them with the city manager would be easiest, and then I'm gonna have you meet me down here. All righty.
Thank you, Mayor.
Oh, thank you, sir.
You know, 1955 seems a long time ago, but boy, that school closed around, I won't say exact year, around the time I was born, and that's a long time ago, and it's interesting, you see students, former students who went there who are active in town, and that energy is still alive here just from the energy that the alumni put into their own organization, but also other organizations around town. So that school's energy is still
I think
quite alive.
It's wonderful the building has been preserved and still used today.
True, truly. We will, I don't have as much official information as I should, but I do want to remind folks of the Parade of Lights this Saturday, the 19th. If you're in a float, I believe you have to be in line at 5, but the parade starts at 6. As usual, we've guaranteed that we will have cold weather. It just seems to come with the parade, very cold weather. For those of the appropriate bend, there's a live nativity at Emmanuel Lutheran Church from 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock on 7th Street. And is there anything going on during the day? Anybody know? Okay, maybe not. Other than, well, St. John's Dunbar has a lot of stuff going on. And I want to thank everyone who participated in the Veterans Day celebration at Sunset Park. Another cold day, but the bugles and taps was beautiful. I mean, just very nicely done. And I don't know if Chad Farber is, no, he's not listening right now, but did get to meet his father. He moved his father, also a pastor, Pastor Sam Farber, up from Florida. I said, you didn't exactly pick the best month of the year to move from Florida to Kansas, but welcome anyway. We will now move on to the consent agenda.
Item 5.1, approve the minutes of November 7th, 2022. Item 5.2, approve resolution 228082, appointing members to citizen boards, commissions, and committees. And item 5.3, authorize the Salina Fire Department to purchase a new fire station alerting system from U.S. Digital Designs, a Phoenix G2 fire station alerting system.
Okay, is there any item that a commissioner would like removed from the consent agenda?
I'd like to remove item 5.3, please.
All righty. Entertain a motion to approve items 5.1 and 5.2 of the consent agenda.
So moved.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded to approve items 5.1 and 5.2 of the consent agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. And item 5.3,
think we have a
Not
handful
sure.
of people here that were involved with this item, but
Any volunteers?
it depends on what information you'd like or whether you'd like a full presentation of the staff report.
I'd like to know a little more about it. This is nearly a $500,000 project. And I do have some concerns.
Okay. I'll turn it over to Chief Snyder, and then he can call on reinforcements as needed.
Good afternoon,
Good afternoon.
City Commissioners. I'd like to ask, because I did not hear you specifically, what it is you would like to know. I mean, I can read from this, but you've read this already, most likely. But I did bring my 2 technical advisors who were instrumental in where we are today with this project. And it started before I got here. And I will tell you that it is vital to our success of providing the best service that we can. If you recall last week, I mentioned, how do we prepare for the future in the fire service? We're behind the curve on station alerting. For our members' physical and mental well-being, station alerting is an integral part in protection of that, integral in their response times and reducing them to make us even more responsive, get to scenes faster. Overall, it enhances our overall operational capabilities and will provide the citizens with a safer city. So if there's something specific, then I have Captains Robinson and Stansbury, who are more technically aware of everything we've gone through. And they did everything from the research on the systems. It had kind of stalled a little bit till I got here. And then these 2 gentlemen are fantastic, and they should be able to answer any technical questions you have that I most likely will not be able to.
Yeah, that's a nice way to tap out.
Absolutely. But you bring your best to the table, and these 2 gentlemen will be absolutely better able to address certain concerns that you may have.
No pressure.
While they're coming forward, this has been a capital improvement item that we've identified for quite some time, trying to figure out both how to fund it and then how to spec it and purchase it. So kind of in support of what Chief Snyder said, it's been in the conversation for quite a while, and with these gentlemen's effort to get it designed and spec'd, we were able to bring this decision to you.
Okay, I guess that is one of my questions, where that funding's coming from.
It's out of the capital improvement program, so it's one of the budgeted items that we accounted for as we put together that program.
The current budget, okay. My big concern is Station 4. We're going to be replacing that station. We're going to put $46,000 in this alerting system there. Will all of that equipment and electronics be moved to the new station?
There is a possibility of that. We don't know exactly how big that station is going to be and the components that will need to go into it. It has been recommended that we keep a few parts on hand in case something breaks. We can plug those in while they ship us a new part. So it'll be a mixture of including some of that equipment into the new station, but also keeping a few of those critical parts on stock, on hand, so that way if something does fail, we can plug it in and continue the station alerting without any interruptions.
Okay, so when we do get to that point of approving the new station, that will all be incorporated in the...
Correct. My understanding is when we go forward with the new station is a station alerting system components will be included in the building of that station.
Yeah, as it relates to that topic, we have done requests for qualifications and should be bringing forward to you selection of a designer pretty soon. But this would be an element of the design that we would have to work with them on as they design a new station for.
Okay, well, I know that's a couple years out, but I just hate throwing $46,000 in a building that's going to be mothballed.
Yeah, I think the intention is to relocate everything that we can and then keep the rest in inventory for our system.
Okay. My other concern is installation. From what I read in the packet here, it's going to be the city's, basically, it's budgeted here for the install, but we're going to have to contract to do all the work?
Yes, and that's through Phoenix's G2 system. They will do all the training for the people that will be going through that. They'll be the ones that decide who they want to use going forward. And
Well,
we've got
they'll
some
put-
bids from,
Yeah, and that
places.
cost is already in that total price for that system, includes the installation of all the wiring and components to be put into the station.
Okay, so they're going to put it out for bids.
that's our understanding, is that they will select who they think is the best and train them appropriately, because they have to go through some training.
And
then install them.
I can jump in here just a little bit. So Jacob Wood, Deputy City Manager, I work with the fire department to put this package out. So it is a turnkey solution, so we will hire G2 Solutions to do the entire install. Who they have do the install is really up to them, but that it is turnkey. We pay G2 Solutions the total amount, as indicated in the blue sheet here, and they will install, it'll be their equipment and all of that. So it is turnkey.
All right, well, that relieves me, because the way I read it here, the equipment's going to show up and you contract, get it installed. Yeah, that, I think was $58,000 budgeted to install, so. All right, so that's all I have.
I guess since we're here, I'll ask the simple question that, I'm encouraged to see that they're going to use generally sourced products, so if something breaks, you can get that. And I assume all the software upgrades are going to be done in the cloud. I guess the question that comes to my mind is, where's the cloud and what happens if it quits? Where's your signaling then?
Their service is housed on our network here. So all the brains and stuff for that is housed on the city network and run that way. And then they provide the updates as they come through, so.
So if there's a breakdown, I mean, everything gets backed up, I take it, at somewhere in
Yeah.
their cloud or our
Yes,
cloud?
correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Any other questions?
I guess just from reading this, the 2022 CIP, we did have budgeted 500,000, is that correct?
Yes.
That's the way I read that, so we're actually under a little bit under what we had budgeted. I noticed it had a 5-year warranty. Do we have any idea like what a life expectancy of a program like this is, or a product?
So we went and toured Lincoln Fire Department up in Nebraska, and their service had been up and running since, I think it was 2010-ish, and they have not had a problem with their system then. Anything that breaks down, the warranty covers it, so they just ship you something new. That's why we kind of want some stuff on hand from the old Station 4, so that while we're in transit from shipping, we can just kind of move things out here and there. So I haven't heard of anything that, as far as catastrophic failures of equipment, but it's all electronic anyway, so
Yeah.
it can fail at any time.
So hopefully you have redundancy, yeah.
Yes.
So. Okay.
All right.
Excuse me, I'd like to continue on that line, if you don't mind, please. Understand where we're at today. We've had consistent failures of our current system. We've had challenges that we've faced and we've overcome. This system is one of the highest-ranked, nationally recognized systems in the United States today. So we are doing ourselves a great service for our community to be able to do this, and as I mentioned, the Salina Fire Department members' health as well, with the way the system is activated, the way the notifications come across. So it is vitally important, and I believe we've covered all our bases, but I appreciate the questions.
Because I think our current system, we've had it for how long? And it's kind of, I hate the word to use hodgepodge, but it's kind of been just put together with duct tape
it's a
and baling
mishmash
wire,
of-
kind of, isn't it? So.
Yes.
Right.
Are there any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Since you did make them come to the podium, I just want to say these guys are fire captains. This isn't what they do on a daily basis, and they did an excellent job of putting together a really well-written RFP, covered all the bases. I was very impressed with the work that they did. So since you're here, I just want to say thanks, guys, for the work that you did. Really good stuff.
So I guess I did have an observation of the other company, the BRYX. There's not even a quote here from them, and they called it the city of Salinas. So did that kind of rule them out?
Well, yeah, that wasn't the main thing, but they didn't submit most of the documentation that we asked for in the RFP, so they were.
Okay, well, did we get other quotes?
So on the RFP that was sent out, those were the two companies that responded.
Those are the only two.
Yes, sir.
Any questions, comments from the public? Any action to be taken on this item?
Mayor Davis, I move that we authorize the city manager to enter into an agreement with U.S. Digital for the Phoenix G2 Fire Station Alerting System in the amount of $490,964.20.
I'll second that.
Okay. Been moved and seconded to authorize the city manager to enter into an agreement with U.S. Digital for the Phoenix G2 Fire Station Alerting System in the amount of $490,964.20. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for the hard work. Now I'll move to administration 6.1.
Item 6.1, consider renewal of land lease for property located approximately at Section 30, Township 14 South, Range 2 West in Salina County, Kansas, and bounded by the old and new channels of the Smoky Hill River.
There he is. Okay.
Sorry.
You're hiding.
Usually I'm sitting way above other
Right.
people. So.
Okay.
Sean Hennessy, Assistant City Manager. I'm bringing this back to you just to give you a refresher. It has been a while. We discussed this in June of this year. This particular parcel that you see up on the screen here, the black box surrounds it. It's more of the triangle wedge shaped within there. Is the parcel land in question. So what happened was in 1965, Arnold Tilburg signed a lease for this parcel. This parcel is both floodway, right-of-way, and it's also within the floodplain due to the Smoky Hill River running right next to it. So the land is very limited in what it could be used for. Additionally, the city acquired this property in 1958. However, there was very limited provision for additional access for the city to this land. So since 1965, Mr. Tilburg has been farming and really maintaining this land. And the lease that was signed on this property in 1965 is an auto-renewing lease. So every year, unless one party or the other says that they intend to terminate the lease, it automatically renews. Mr. Tilburg has been paying $70 a year, although the benefit to the city has been, because of that limited access, we haven't had to maintain this parcel. Again, that was something that wasn't really thought of at the time. This issue first came up when you see the map up here. Mr. Pestinger, who owns the parcel to what's on the screen to the right, which is part of the golf course, due to the change in the channels at the time, the golf course at that time was given both two well water rights and a river access right. When Pestinger Enterprises eventually took over control of the golf course, they inherited those water rights on this parcel. So Mr. Tilburg has a lease on the land, but Mr. Pestinger has water rights on the land, and the lease includes an easement for Mr. Pestinger to have access to those water wells. And at the time, Mr. Pestinger was interested in leasing this land, potentially, well, frankly, it's one of the very few things it could be used for was growing sod. And at that one, they agreed to discuss to see if they could come to an agreement on the use for the land. I did not hear back from them for quite a while, so I followed up. Mr. Pestinger has indicated due to staffing shortages, he's not interested in leasing the land anymore. And so right now, Mr. Tilburg has been continuing for all these years to maintain this property and to farm it. Due to the very limited access that the city has, it would be beneficial to the city if he would be able to maintain and really to keep the parcel as he has been since 1965. And so that's kind of where we're at today. We just wanted to make sure we brought this to the city commission since it was an automatically renewing lease. Staff recommends, there's really three options. If the city commission doesn't take any action, then the lease will automatically renew. But again, it's only on a yearly basis. If at any point Mr. Tilburg or the city decides that they want to terminate this lease, they just have to give 60 days notice prior to the beginning date of the lease. So both Mr. Tilburg and the city would retain that right to terminate the lease on a yearly basis. Option two would be if you wanted to initiate the termination of the lease, propose a new rate or terms to Mr. Tilburg. That would require the termination of the lease and the notice of that and the renegotiation of the lease, or potentially we could request any interested parties to submit for proposed uses of the land. However, it's because of the access. You know, you've got the river on one side, you've got the golf course on the other side, you've got Mr. Tilburg and the others. There's very limited both access to the property as well as the fact that it's in the floodplain and is a floodway right-of-way limits the use of the property. Staff recommends number one, but wanted to see if you had any questions to get your input on this.
So just for clarification, this would be a situation in which if we are content with things the way they are, we should do nothing and move on to the next item on the
You
agenda.
can, if you're more comfortable making a motion to clarify that you want to leave it the same, you could certainly do that, but no action would have the same result.
Okay, thank you.
But I think one of the concerns is Mr. Pessinger wanted to make sure he still had rights to the water rights, which is very important for the golf course. And again, I think as Mr. Hennessy said, Mr. Tilburg farms the ground to the south, so it makes sense that he would, the only other person would have any interest in it would be the golf course that would have access, and Mr. Pessinger doesn't. So I'm all for renewing the lease as is. Keeps us from having to maintain anything, so.
All right.
Well, I think it needs to be modified from the 1965 terms. I would say at $10 an acre, just to cover the expense of the city's expense to maintain this lease and to bring it before us. It's yeah, $70 is. You make a lot of money on hay when you're just leasing at $70 an acre for that much ground.
Well, on the other hand, we do make money on paper when we don't have to maintain it ourselves. So it's while it's not cash in the bank, it's one less invoice we have to pay.
And Mr. Hennessy touched on it, but that is the balance that staff discussed and struggled with just a little bit. With it being landlocked like it is, and we're not really in a position to just take competitive bids and get market prices because of the lack of access. So we're trying to, strike a balance between us not having to maintain it nor us having to work out some alternate access arrangement that is not self-evident.
How many acres was it? I don't even remember.
17.
How many?
17.
17. Yeah,
I believe we'd spend
for
thousands mowing it.
Yeah, for the amount of money you would do, Mr. Tilburg has been a good neighbor and taken care of the ground, and I'm fine with the 70. It's not going to make or break the city either way. So.
Any questions, comments from the public?
I guess I would add one other thing. One thing of value from staff's perspective is that you as the governing body have been made aware and deliberated and made a conscious decision rather than just letting it ride without consideration.
Thank you.
Because he's going to lose them. The Ninth Circuit Court has ruled on his water rights in the whole United States.
Thank you.
Mayor, I move we allow the lease to automatically renew at the current lease rate.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded to allow the lease, Mr. Tilburg, to automatically renew at its current lease rate. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Motion carries 4-1. We will, I guess we're down to other business. Is there a desire to continue conversation on,
There is on the part of staff, so
Staff,
we could get
okay.
some direction from you
well,
if we could.
we'll let staff have the floor first.
I think we've covered, for those that are just tuning in or to make sure everyone's understanding the topic, had study session conversation on Bird Scooter's proposal for a memo of understanding or a pilot program for scooters. Staff conducted a survey, presented those results to you in study session. You had good conversation that ended up being cut short at the end of the study session at 4. And you're taking up kind of individually your feelings about whether we should pursue the program or we shouldn't. Not expecting a definitive answer from the City Commission today, but some indication of where you stand would be helpful. I guess if there's lack of consensus or lack of clear direction, I think staff does feel an obligation to bring it forward in response to Bird's request for a pilot program and an MOU. So I guess I'd leave it there. If you have any additional questions about the program, the data, the details, you're certainly welcome to ask staff of that, but really just kind of looking for some indication of consensus from the City Commission whether you wish to proceed with a pilot program or not.
At the last of the other sessions, Mayor said he had some more remarks he wanted to make, but I think staff's kind of waiting to hear from Mr. Longbein and myself where
You gentlemen, please go first.
You want the honors of me? Well, I'm going to say I'm not in favor of the pilot. I think staff's going to have to go through the operation of doing the thinking through what's appropriate for the community where these items can be operated and how they are. But I think they've got enough on their plate without us going down this road. I have some concerns about the operational aspects, the people that manage those carts. I mean, we've seen them in Hayes and Manhattan. I've seen them in Singapore and Paris and in Kansas City, and they're all over the place. And I just can't see riding something that's 16 miles an hour. They go 16 miles an hour on any pedestrian area at all. And then I just have a whole series of problems about how we're going to public educate and how the police department's going to enforce. So for me, it boils down to safety. Come back in a couple of years when we started the river renewal and it might change my mind, but I don't think it's necessary at this point.
Commissioner Longbein.
Sure, that's all. I do not sense public support for this. The survey results kind of had a lot of gray area there, and I just perceived it was mostly to the negative. I see the only way I would support going forward with this is to have it focused around your schools, your universities, and the major employers such as Tony's and Great Plains, where there would be a need for actual transportation. My other concern is everything rides upon the fleet manager. And I see finding the help, someone to manage that, being a challenge. I think it would take more than one person. One person couldn't be on call 24/7. And my other concern is the financial stability of the company itself. It's went from a $9 stock to a 36-cent stock over the past year, and I don't see them as a viable corporation.
Yeah, but I think we may be still mixing two issues. One is whether Bird comes in as a proprietor who rents the scooters. The other issue is how do we regulate scooters? Because it'd be difficult to contract with anyone if we don't have an idea of where the scooters go. I would like to see the issue of electric bikes and scooters being resolved. I mean, just what are Salina's rules regarding where you can ride them, where you can't? Because even without Bird, you have the same issues with the electric bikes now. The only difference being where it goes at night. In our residential neighborhoods, those bikes are probably not going to end up more than 25 feet from the destination. So if somebody's leaving them on the sidewalk in a residential neighborhood, I don't think you're going to have to look too far to find out where that person is. And education, you know, is going to keep our sidewalks downtown different from other cities. You know, in Washington, D.C., yep, they're on the sidewalk, they're on intersections. I don't know if it's possible for Bird to, you know, if they had complaints, to see who left it there and do some retroactive user education. I don't know if their software would allow that. But the, yeah, you know, I don't have as much of a problem with the bikes and scooters if they're in a safe place. I'm worried when you have something 16 miles an hour on a street that's 40 miles an hour, but then we're putting bicycles on that same street as it is now. Or we hope, as you know, with Ohio being probably the one big exception where that sidewalk is just miserably skinny. Of course, if I was riding a bike, I wouldn't ride it on Ohio either. But you know, where we have wide 10-foot sidewalks, you know, I could see these being on the sidewalk. But we're going to have to eventually legislate the electric bikes in the same fashion that we're looking at these scooters now. So it's
I agree with you there.
That work
I agree
going to
with
have
you
to
there,
do.
Mayor, and I think the private, just people buying their own private scooters is going to force us to that, the bikes themselves. But I don't think Bird is the vehicle to get us there.
Right. Well, I would just soon as, even without Bird not being an issue, I think we've got that base work to do now anyway, because the electric bike, you know, they're not well lit. They move faster than you'd expect a bicycle to move. And they're quite, I see them, you know, potentially as a safety issue. And, you know, when cities don't mandate that, you know, if you're a bike, you have to behave like a bike, you know, you can't be a hybrid vehicle and pedestrian. You have to be one or the other.
We,
work with PD and kind of come up with some graphic material that we could probably put out through social media and just start maybe with a baseline awareness of these are the rules. If you're driving an electric bike, this is how you should be behaving at this time. And we could do that without changing code. I mean, we could just start with an
I would be
informational.
thrilled if I'd stop seeing people riding on the sidewalks downtown, but unfortunately, the very ones that are doing it are probably the, I don't know, hardest to communicate with, if that's a fair way to say it. But I think bicycle education would be, and scooter education for that matter, great initiative. Yeah.
we can definitely take a
Stop
look at
them and
that.
give them a flyer.
We may identify the need for some tweaks just in terms of practical developments, and since that code's been written. But that is kind of one segregated topic. The modifying the code to account for scooters and operations and parking is a whole nother level of code drafting that would be necessary if we wanted to go forward with Bird or any scooter provider. But I think what I'm hearing is you want to be sure that we're addressing the technology that is out there that can be purchased privately, so we've got clarity on that, but not necessarily proceeding with an MOU and a pilot program for rental scooters in the right of way.
Well, I just think when I look at the concerns the citizens had, you know, one is safety. Safety gets addressed with defining where these can be used. You know, the big issue is, you know, and I hate to use the term blight, but the perceived blight of unattended scooters. And we can be innovative as far as downtown drop-off spots, and again, in residential areas, just neighborhoods would have to police themselves.
I guess my concern will go back to safety. The person on the $3,000 electric bike is a different person than the one renting the little scooter. When I go out on my bike, I know I'm gonna be in traffic. I always got my helmet on, but I put on my reflective vest, I turn my lights on, and I'm pretty cautious. The people that get on the scooter out of just a whim, they're not gonna be very cautious.
Well, that may be an overgeneralization.
Well, then we're becoming kind of almost like a nanny state at this point, because we have another transportation option. We have a private business with a business model that's worked in other cities. And I find the idea that what if, because these are available to the general public already. People are buying these. They're buying the e-bikes. We're going to see more of them. We're going to have to address the public safety issue regardless of yay or nay. And I guess the business part of me is, I don't like the idea we're the gatekeepers of this. It's either going to work or it's not. They're going to hold their clients accountable to the rules that they have. And they were very clear about, there's a stipulation when you agree to ride their scooter, you stay off the sidewalk. It's part of the agreement. There's even a little sticker on the scooter. I mean, to me, if it's going to be a problem, we can address it, but the idea that we're just going to shut it down before it even shows up, I don't like. So I'm in favor of the program.
As an example, if I wanted to meet my wife at lunch at Chuck's Bar Grill, I could take one from the hospital, ride it up there. She'll bring me back. Now, Burb would have to go pick it up from Chuck's, but I'm going to leave it on wherever in the parking lot somewhere. I'm not going to leave it on the sidewalk. But that's me as a person. I mean, we can't legislate what people's morals are.
I want to see this happen.
Well, now I'm not going to ride it up Santa Fe. I'm going to go up Fifth. I'm going to go on the street that's safe. Anything I would consider safe enough to ride a bike. I doubt I'm riding a bicycle 16 miles an hour. I mean,
They're surprisingly intuitive. They're surprisingly intuitive.
You carry your helmet in your backpack?
If I know I'm going to do it ahead of time, right. I'll be that nerd out there with the helmet on.
You'll hear about it.
Huh?
You'll hear about it if you don't.
Oh, believe it. Right, because Murphy's Law would say, guess who got hit? The neurologist got hit riding without a helmet on.
So if we do a pilot project, you have 30 days as per the MOU, and that could be adjusted. It's all part of negotiation, but their standard MOU says if we don't like that, we've got 30 days and they'll get out. So that's another thing to just kind of think about in that pilot project component. I mean, like right now we're doing a lot of what ifs. Well, what if it's successful? What if it's not? The pilot program is set up to handle that this is not working for us scenario. Just want to throw that back out there, that is a tool in your toolbox, different than sometimes the thought process we put into building a whole new program that we're going to have responsibilities for and, we're buying equipment for and things like that. If we don't like this, you can send them packing.
And this is good conversation. It's a little bit awkward that it's not an action item. I guess nothing prevents you from taking action under other business, and the city attorney may not appreciate me counting heads, but I'm sensing 3-2 at the moment. And unless there's direction to the contrary.
If, like right now, and I should probably be embarrassed to admit this, I don't know if those electric bikes can be ridden on the sidewalk anywhere in town.
They shouldn't be on the sidewalk.
Shouldn't be, but are they allowed?
I'm not going to speak to traffic laws.
Well,
but the fact that I don't know, and I'm not sure if you know, makes me think that there's a lot of people out in the city don't know.
So to try to help the conversation, if that's the concern, my sense is there's consensus in the governing body to go ahead, staff review that, and either mount an education campaign or bring back revisions to clarify it, and then proceed with an education campaign on the private ownership of scooters and electric bikes. So that's kind of one topic. The topic I'm sensing you're split on is whether you want to go forward with a pilot project for scooters in rights-of-way. And when I say rights-of-way, not necessarily driving them in the rights-of-way, but what makes this a little bit unique is their desire for permission to have staging areas to, set them, pick them up, drop them off.
And that wouldn't be much different from what the Blue Cross bicycles now anyway. Just as far as the space on the
And
sidewalk.
not to be contrary, but it is slightly different as they're not permanently affixed facilities. Those drop-off spots, there's no equipment that's affixed to the sidewalk or permanently there. Those drop-off spots can change at any moment, and they're truly temporary.
Yeah, but I guess the grant of permission would be very similar to bus stops or the bicycle locations.
It might give us a couple of weeks to come up with a creative solution to drop-off spots.
Well, I guess there are a lot of details within that, but I think to what City Manager Scragg is saying, staff question is right now, do we put more time and resources in to flushing out an actual pilot project? Is that something you want? If it is not something you want, I promise we will find other things to do.
I'd like to flush it out, but I'd like to first find out, have an established set of rules, because if we have one set of rules for scooters, another set of rules for electric bikes, another one for manual bikes, no one's going to know where they can ride what.
So I think back to what City Manager Scragg was saying is there's an educational understanding about coaster toys, bikes, pedestrians, and that, and kind of informational campaign, correct?
Yeah, it might even, just let us know what the current law is.
I guess I'm gonna go first. I guess if we're discussing, do we want to move forward with Bird? At this point, my answer is no. I think city staff has enough on their plate. Maybe someday when you have nothing going on in your department, we can look at it again. But right now, I think with the shortage we have in development services and all we have going on, the shortage in the PD department, I'm going to vote no.
And I'm right there at that same level.
No.
But that still does not solve the issue of.
Yeah, you have my commitment. The staff will take up that issue.
Yeah, that's a whole different. Yeah, that's
another issue.
Yeah.
Well, it's an issue that needs to be done first, and I think once that's handled properly, and you see what's happening with the increased private use, you may come back and revisit your opinion on the Bird.
Okay, so we're all on the same page. We will get to the bottom of what current laws are for electric bikes and electric scooters as the law exists right now, bring that back to the body, and then we are not pursuing a relationship with Bird at this time.
I would like to make one final comment, and obviously we know where everybody sits on this. It just occurred to me that there's not one single item of transportation, maybe a bus, that has this much oversight. I mean, if you buy a car, you buy a bicycle, motorcycle, et cetera, the level of oversight from the company and from us, to me, it's almost like it's very regulated. There's a lot of eyes watching, and it seems counterintuitive to me that we're okay with people renting a car, motorcycle, bicycles, and these little scooters that do 16 miles per hour are a point of contention, when really if you apply that same logic, they kind of parallel each other. And so I guess I'm really having a hard time with the idea that we're just going to shut the door on a business that wants to come in here and generate tax revenue.
And
I'll leave it alone.
I'm just offering this up as an observation, I guess. If Bird's business model was to segregate out parking areas on grocery store parking lots and gas station parking lots on private property, and they came to us and said, we've got all those arrangements made, and we're just going to start renting these, then I would feel much more obligated to say, that is a private model that we don't have any say in unless the riders start violating traffic laws. I think the unique part of this is they're asking for their parking spaces to be within city rights of way.
Understood.
And now the rest of it, you know, what I saw in terms of survey concerns is parking of them and just kind of randomly leaving them on sidewalks, whatever the case may be, and time would tell whether that could get educated into a
The
good
parking
spot,
spaces
but-
really become where they stop riding them. It's not even the public right-of-ways. I mean, there's a staging area, but the difference between the bikes that OCCK does, you have to return it to a stand. These scooters, I don't have to return anywhere. I can ride and I just can leave it lay wherever. And that to me starts being a little bit of a difference. So
But to the user, that's the beauty of the system, in that you take it to where you're going, the company comes and picks it up.
hopefully.
Well, they have to, or, I mean, if they want to keep making money, I mean, they have to retrieve it.
The biggest
Yeah.
complaint I hear from other communities about them is that they're just laid wherever.
Yeah.
And it might be days before they get picked up.
Would certainly go into our review after a 30-day period. And if they don't come pick them up, they're not renting them. So their bottom line would tell them that's not a good business model.
It is pretty entrepreneurial. If you remember when Bird presented, their like scooter wrangler is an independent contractor, so that person makes money off of hustle. Okay.
The nuance into not contracting with Bird that Commissioner Longbine touched on is that the company's not doing very well. And in our own information from the survey, there's a lot of people stepping back from the relationship they had with them. So,
Well, if we don't proceed with Bird, now, I wouldn't throw the information away. It's good preparation.
just
for
may not be the right time.
Well, for considering how we might want to set it up in the future, so that if someone else approaches us, or Bird approaches us again, we know what questions we want to ask, what concerns we have. So it's not effort misplaced, it's a good foundation.
I still get back to the staffing issue and the fact that if there are complaints, nobody's calling California, somebody's calling City Hall. That's what I'm going to guess, so anyway.
Well, and then we call Bird, and we know how that story's gonna end as far as contract.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other issues for other business? All right, we'll move to Citizens Forum. It's an opportunity to come to the podium and address an issue of your liking, and try to keep your eyes on that clock there.
Yeah, Lauren Mantle, Salina, Kansas. What you're just talking about, if you go to these state lakes, they are banning electric vehicles. I've been there. I watched the people, they had to load up their electric vehicle. They're banning them at Canopolis. They're not letting electric vehicles there. It's a lake. Call the Federal Corps of Engineers, call the state park. They're banning them. They're a hazard. This happened about 2 weeks ago. I am southbound on 9th Street, and here in my lane comes one of them little electric vehicles. I and another driver, we had to dodge him. It was north of the tracks, West North Street. And I went on south, and I said, it's too bad we can't report him to law enforcement. Well, there was law enforcement right there, and I did not stop and report him to law enforcement. I says, I'm not going to put law enforcement at risk. If he's dumb enough, he wants to drive in the northbound lane, in my lane, well, then he's going to get run over. So they're banning them.
Anyone else? Anyone online? Doesn't look like it. All right. We can, I just saw the folks who are online. Do we have any other business for which we're calling the administrative people
No,
online?
I think they're just
interested
on-
parties. All right, that's good. There is a request for an executive session. And
We have revised wording for you in light of kind of what's evolved since we last talked, so you should have that at your seat. And my best guess on time is 25 minutes.
all righty. And Commissioner Longbine, if I could get you to do us the honor.
Here, go straight to it.
21.
5:24. 20. Mayor, I move the City Commission recess into executive session for 25 minutes to discuss with legal counsel the subject of ongoing legal considerations related to the Drever Partners LLC housing development proposal, including discussion of informational critical to pending confidential negotiations for possible implementation of a version of the proposal by Presidio Development Partners LLC of San Francisco, California, based upon the need for consultation with an attorney for the public body, which would be deemed privileged in the attorney-client relationship pursuant to KSA 73757319B2. The open meeting will resume in this room at 5:23.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to recess into executive session for 25 minutes to discuss with legal counsel issues related to confidential negotiations as described. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. We're now in executive session.
Commissioners and attendees, in addition to yourselves, will be City Legal Counsel Greg Bankson, myself, Deputy City Manager Jacob Wood, Assistant City Manager Sean Hennessy, Director of Community Development Services Lauren Driscoll, and we do not expect any action coming out of executive session. Nope.
It is 5:24. We're back in regular session. We do not have anything to report today or any action to take. We're getting close to the point where we will have something to report sometime soon. So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mayor, I move we adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.